Welcome to All About Art. My name is Alexandra, and I'm an art historian, curator, and writer. Within this podcast, topics relating to art history, cultural policy, the art sector, as well as a large range of other art-related topics will be covered. Conducting critical discussions, having entertaining exchanges, or just enjoying some relaxing chats, All About Art is where you'll find it all. Join me in exploring and developing cultural discourse. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of All About Art. This episode is part of a special partnership with MTArt Agency, a certified B Corp award-winning talent agency for the most exciting, up-and-coming visual artists worldwide, and a creative agency that delivers exciting, art-driven projects for brands, public bodies, and cultural organizations. While the art industry typically concentrates on selling art on walls, MTArt's visionary approach focuses on investing in and supporting the people behind it. In this episode, I sat down with the founder and CEO of MTArt Agency, Tanguy. We talked about how she started MTArt, what it means to be represented by a talent agency in the visual sector, and how the company is disrupting the industry. We also talked about what the day in the life of a CEO looks like, what attributes she looks for in potential collaborators, her vision for the company, and so much more. Thank you to Maureen for sitting down with me and to MTArt Agency for this partnership. This is the first of a series of monthly episodes with MTArt, so listeners, do give myself and MTArt Agency a follow and turn on notifications for All About Art to stay updated on the next episodes. As always, thank you so much for listening. So Maureen, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Good morning.
I am just going to dive right in with my very first question. Let's start with the basics. Tell me about your background and your education and how you ended up founding MTArt Agency.
So I grew up in a tiny island called Île just off the west coast of France. There's more birds than people, so we're only 9,000 people a year, which is quite romantic if you think about it. Most people actually don't continue studying, but I think something that was really special for my background is we're surrounded by nature. So visuals are all around us. So you wake up in the morning and the sea is bigger than you, the fields are bigger than you, everything is bigger than you. And I think that sense and that longing for beauty and visuals were kind of inbred in a sense because you're getting exposed to it every day. So I think that was the best education. When it comes to actual studies, I did a degree in France called Hypocagne, which is a lot of politicians do. I like to think of that degree as a suitcase because it's like a suitcase on anything from geopolitics to philosophy to, even historiography. So it's very much kind of developing your critical thinking on the spot. It's known to be such an intense degree that most people actually drop out, but it also means that you have a capacity to work consistently. That is great. Like I think after having done that, I could lock myself in the room for 12 hours and just work consistently. And I think it gives you a very good stamina to take on with the world. So that was a great suitcase. At the time, I generally was so puzzled to why I was studying this because it doesn't lead to any specific job. But I think fast forward 15 years, it's probably one of the most useful things I did. It structured my mind really, really nicely. And then I came here to do history of art at Warwick University.
Oh, really?
Yes. I don't know. It's so funny that you didn't know that.
I didn't, I did for some reason. I don't know why.
So I did history of art for 2 years, did drop out because I was offered an amazing job.
No, that I did know. I actually did.
No, but it's perfect. I think given our friendship, it's good that you're still discovering things and vice versa.
Yes.
It would be concerning otherwise. But so I think, to be fully honest with you, I didn't really like this degree at all. I think the first degree I adored, and I think that critical thinking, like even a historiography, the fact that I was told that all history that you're being taught may be misleading and why each government is constructing it was probably one of the most useful thing I kind of got taught. History of art I felt was quite disappointing, and obviously Warwick University is an amazing university, but it was more, I felt I didn't want to just look at PowerPoint. I think I was not prepared to be on a campus where everything was revolving around the campus. I'm very much someone that likes to be lost in the city and in a place. And in a weird way, I see art as, and we'll get to that, but I see it as such a living medium, something so alive and so organic that I think it was probably not for me the way it was being taught. So I dropped out and then became the young Gary manager of the Outsiders Gallery, who's my first boss was Steve Lazaridis, who discovered Banksy and JR. And I think I was also probably with loads of arrogance so eager to work. I think I will be a great student at 50, and I was a really challenging one in my early 20s because I was dying to just be taken seriously and work and be given experience. So I think I will probably revert it. I'll probably restudy at 50.
I really understand, or I can feel what you mean when you say with being eager and being ready to learn and gain experience and being, wanting to gain that. It really resonates with me.
Oh, I'm glad.
So how did you end up founding MTArt Agency? What was it that led you there? Was there a specific idea? Was there the light bulb over your head? Or
I think it's, I'm definitely someone who, as you know, because we know each other very well, I think I never say no to an opportunity. So I think I have a good radar for what is an opportunity, what is not. But in a weird way, I never thought I would be my own boss, or I never thought I would be running my own company. I think it was more that I kept on being put in a position where the right opportunity was in front of me, or the right idea was in front of me. And I'm someone that would never be able to say no if I think this is something valuable. So when I was running the gallery in London for Steve Lazaridis, an investor from Los Angeles who had an advertising company called Steph Sabag came to my gallery. So actually, luckily, the gallery he had gone before me, the girl at the desk completely ignored him. And I said luckily because obviously I was a stark contrast to this. I was super chatty, as you know, and I kind of ran through the whole exhibition, and I also gave him a book at the time because it was JR who was showing, of JR2. And so he kind of asked for a follow-up coffee, and we sat down for coffee, and he said generally he's rarely encountered someone who was communicating about art that way, and he is actually looking for someone to open his own art gallery in Los Angeles. So it will be an investment visa. It will mean that he will put the money in, but someone has to build it, and I will be earning 50% of the business, which obviously was a huge deal. I was 23, so
that's amazing.
It was a huge deal. I think I was quite settled in London. I think I never dreamed of Los Angeles, but I just also kind of felt in my head that will probably never come across again as an opportunity. So I said yes. I named the gallery after the small island in France I come from, the Doré Gallery in Beverly Hills. And I was completely out of my depth at every single level because we opened in the middle of Beverly Hills. The gallery was huge, like a really beautiful space that we helped designing, the two of us. And we opened with loads of celebrities. So on the night, Demi Moore was there, quite a lot of people who are quite known in Hollywood. And all of this world was quite new, but also I don't think I even comprehended. I don't think fame was ever something that I was partially interested in. But I thought it was really interesting. The same night I opened the gallery, someone called Mike Holovitz, who started the largest talent agency in the world called CA, asked me if we could meet. I didn't know who Mike Holovitz was. Now, for all American people who will listen to your podcast, they'll be like, she's mad. So I said, I can't because I'm cooking for my artist. And I sent him a picture of basil, tomato, and mozzarella plates that I was making. And he probably was like, who on earth is this person who is just declining meeting, plus sending me this random picture of a salad? So therefore, that was postponed, and we met a few days later. And that meeting completely changed my life because I never actually met someone that bright. His brain was just extraordinary. And that first night, we spoke for 4.5 hours, surrounded by rough coats in his house. And I was just like, this is probably one of the smartest person I'm going to meet. And I need to absorb his brain very quickly because when you encounter such smart people, you need to make sure you listen to everything they say. And the more, obviously, luckily, we kept on seeing each other, he kept on mentoring me, and the more I would hear about what he had built, the more I was like, I want to build a talent agency. That's actually much more what my personality is like and what I think I can do and what I think I like doing. And it would also open up new revenue streams and opportunities for the talents I work with. And so that's how I ended up splitting with my first business partner, returning to London where I felt the network was by far the strongest, and taking as much of the brain of Mike Holovitz I could have from that and build the first talent agency in the art world subsequently.
That's actually a perfect segue into my next question regarding the talent agency. So how does it differ from the traditional business models of other arts organizations?
I think, frankly, as you know, everything is completely different. So I know you're nodding. You're just like, of course.
Yeah.
I think I'm not even partially doing a comparison. I think when I was in LA, I saw that Michael had built the career of a Steven Spielberg, Tom Cruise, had created crazy campaigns, advertising campaign. He was behind the Coca-Cola campaign with the teddy bears, and that he had competed against a major advertising agency as a talent agency to kind of get it. And every project he had been doing, I was like, this is just so amazing. I want to do that. I want my talents to be building projects that inspired thousands of people. I'm not interested in inspiring 2 people a day, even if it's the wealthiest. So I think we've really turned the sector around in his head in building the business. Mm-hmm. On the day-to-day, we basically spot the best talents. We have a selection committee who helps us do that. We now have over 35 people on the talent agency side that are being signed and built career-wise with great names like Camille Walala, which is one of the latest, which I'm so proud to have signed. And, as you know, the first one we ever signed was David Savant-Schreiber, who's had an amazing career.
Yeah.
And then on the creative agency side, so very similar to all the talent agencies in Hollywood, we are asked by businesses to integrate the arts in the most extraordinary of contexts. Now, this could be public art. So that will be all landlords, governments, councils. And like right now, if you go on Piccadilly Circus in London, you will have 3 large sculptures we've helped implementing. It's the same in Westminster, the same pretty much across London. And we were also behind the largest public art painting in the world in Paris on the Champ de Mars with our artist Sape. So it's very much kind of rethinking how art becomes a visual narrative that is part of the city. And then the second thing is I work with PR companies, advertising agencies and brands, again, in weaving the amazing stories of the artists into and matching them to the brands that make sense. So as you know, because you love Tiffany Boyle as well, she's just about to become the face of Gucci and Vogue. We just shot for this 10 days ago. And that's, again, her narrative as that is inclusive and sustainable weaved into a brand that is wanting to do this more and more and has been doing this more and more. Mm-hmm. So that's more like matching great stories together, which I've always loved. And that's a much more B2B side. But what's amazing is that suddenly visuals are, because the art world it's very limiting. It's just like artworks that goes on walls in a very specific luxurious environments. What I wanted really with my company is I wanted to touch every part of the visuals we consume. And I have a life now where from what I wear on the brand collaboration side to what I see on the tube, to what I go on the streets, to what I have on the walls, this is all my artists who are kind of inspiring people constantly. So suddenly it feels very 360. It feels like you're immersed into an incredible visual landscape that is very inspiring. And I think that's the reason we don't care about being similar to art businesses. We want to be part of the visual sector. Competing against advertising agencies at times and against placemaking agencies who are not part of the art world. And I want to compete with them because I want to compete for my share of the visual sector. And that's why I want to grow the business. So love the art world. We obviously are a part of it through the collecting side and the way we build their careers. But the vision is definitely much bigger.
I think that it's really important what you do with your company with this form of democratization of art. And I think that feeding it into everyday life is really important because I know that we're going to touch on this later in the series, but things like the visual diet. And for anyone listening, there's a wonderful TED Talk that Maureen did about the visual diet, and you can see more information on it on the website. And I think that it's very important to influence society in a positive way. I mean, I think that it will improve quality of life. It improves motivation, education, when people interact with art more. And it starts small. It starts by seeing it and noticing it out of the corner of your eye. And then all of a sudden you're seeing it everywhere. And then you're interacting with it more. And then you're going to Piccadilly to go see the public art projects. And then all of a sudden you're making art or wanting to work in the sector. And that's how we encourage people to engage with it more. And I think that that's absolutely magnificent. And I think that MTArt Agency is really making big strides in that.
That's really kind. I think it's quite surreal to be in the position where all of this has kind of worked out. I mean, the gamble was huge.
Yeah.
And that was taken. And I could never highlight how grateful I am on the fact that, this is a tangible vision. Like, we are in an office with a team that's incredible, with talents that are incredible, with friendships like ours, which are very special. And I think it's very strange because I think I knew deep down how big the gamble was to change that. And I think it's quite magical that not only did we, but I think we're doing even more, which is really special.
I agree. So talking about specifics in the art world, what changes do you want to see?
I mean, I have a long list, as you know. I think the reason most people say, like, why do you work so hard? And I think the answer is I'm still very, like, boiling with anger with certain things in the sector. And that anger doesn't mean I go and aggress people randomly on the streets. Like, it's just a very controlled one. It's just more like I am very bothered with the way the sector runs. And I'm glad that I am bothered, because the fact that I'm bothered means I will keep going until changes kind of go by one. The first thing, as you know, first and foremost, is that I find visuals universal. They are ultimately, going back to me cycling on the bike from like 5 years old onwards, like, beauty was surrounding me. And that is quite incredible, that even if you come from like a rough background, you can be surrounded by beauty, and you can be surrounded by amazing visuals, and that can lift your day. And I'm super attached to it because I have seen as a young person how that influenced on me. So the idea, therefore, that the art world, and it's called a world, it's not a sector, is even just a tiny world. It bothers me as a definition of itself. I never wanted to be part of a world. I want to be part of something very much larger. And so I think that is because it's super unequal to get in. It's being done in a way that is hard to get in, so that 90% of the people who will be in will be usually privileged. And my brain simply can't connect why visuals and privileges should go hand in hand. I think, in fact, it's probably one of the most universal language we can all share. So the idea that it's a world just puzzle me. I think social economics, therefore, are really challenging in the sector, as you know. Not to bring the female side, but you know yourself that this is something, as a young female, that I would always advocate for more female into the sector as well, because I feel like if you've got your foot into the door, you've got to make sure to open it widely and bring as many people from the diversity as you can. But as you know, I'm now at a place where I'm lucky to be a mum at the same time as doing what I love. And sadly, most of my girlfriends are dropped. Like, we were part of the hardworking 20s, super driven. And I can see that we're not many left who are at that level. And that breaks my heart. I think beyond already the inequalities of social economies to get in the sector, I think to be faced with the fact that actually there's a second wave of inequalities happening at that point, it's really hard to bear. And I think it's the same on the artist side. So obviously, as a company, we've got 50-50 female and men artists. Quite a few of my artists have confided recently, and quite a few already have kids, and we're super supportive of that, men or women. And we're a B Corp, which means that, like, we pay everyone fairly, and no points do we do unpaid internships or below the minimum wage, or all the things that you hear in the sector. So I think we're trying our best, first of all, to lead by example. We're definitely too small to be implementing these changes at large yet, but I hope that we will be more and more the guys that push the changes. It's everything that needs to be changed. It's an economical change, it's an inequalities change, it's a gender parity change, a diversity change, and just a whole approach to art where, of course, lucky again to have a beautiful life where I have beautiful works in the house, but art is not just luxury ultimately, and I don't see art as just a luxurious medium or a proof of social status. It's art can just bring so many more things, and I hope we're proving that every day, because we have kept the beautiful art collecting side of things, but I hope we prove that it's not limited to that. It should be something so much bigger that can belong to therefore so many more people. So there's a lot is the answer. There's a lot of changes too, and I hope we're bringing a few of them.
I can definitely attest to that. I do think you are bringing them. I mean, not only through your public art projects, which means that everyone can access it, who has, access to that public space, but also, for example, with your Young Collectors program, and how, I don't come from a upper class background. I come from a working class, middle class background. Well, working class, and then I have to say, like, I think when you come from humble beginnings, you do realize when you begin to have your life change a little bit and your class status, quote unquote, when you notice that changes. Completely. So that's why I do hesitate to say that I come from a working class background, but the thing is that I do, and I've worked my way up to the point where I can say, actually, I wouldn't consider myself working class now.
Totally.
However, I was able to afford one of the pieces that was available with MTArt Agency, and for example, there were other collaborations and other things that I was able, for example, I have a work by Amber Victoria, but also by Claire Luxton, I have a print, and all of these things that were very accessible for me. And I was thrilled, and it's not just having it in my home, but also walking by, I look to my left and I see the Apple store, and then I look to my right and I also see Claire on Regent Street, right? Am I getting that? Yes. On my way to work. And it's just such a pleasure to see that and to have that access and to open it up to people.
Yeah, definitely. And it makes, I think I'm the same. I never know what to say on working class or middle class background, because I'm always feeling like I am beyond privileged at this stage in my life. So like, I'm always finding it so difficult, especially from a French background, because the social class system is slightly different. I mean, the fact that my first degree was free, like our school system is free. It means that in a weird way, I could be upper middle class here, having not been upper middle class in France, because the education I received is of the highest of levels. So I'm comfortable if you throw me something about philosophy or culture, opera or dance or theater, and in a way that therefore I could totally mingle in the upper class system here, because my education was that. And that's what I mean by inequalities, is that you just see on small things as you're an expat, that just the education system meant I could integrate the system here, but which also breaks your heart to think that by the second you don't have that, you just simply can't integrate it. So it's a hard thing to kind of determine which class exactly you're from when you keep on climbing it, I think.
Yes, it's a difficult conversation, because it also puts people into boxes as well, and so it's kind of a larger conversation, and we're touching on it because it's important to mention, but I completely understand that it is such a wide thing. So I'm going to move on to the next question, which is a little bit lighter. What does the normal day of an entrepreneur / CEO look like? Are you someone who's part of the 5 a.m. club, or?
I think I have no routine. I'm lucky to still have a relationship, because I think poor Will, my lovely man, has never been in a place where my day looked like the same. And he has to kind of be pretty flexible around that. I think I am an inbox zero, that. What I've been good at, and what I advise for anyone running a company or starting to run one, is I am very good brain-wise to know what are my priorities, but also what are the things I can do straight away in the short term versus the things I need to leave for the long term. Meaning, like you mentioned, I've done the TED Talks, I've done the academic paper, and the book for visual diet is coming out as well. So I've been able to do long-term tasks, meanwhile being on top of my short terms. That's by far the hardest stretch when you're a founder and a single founder, because there was no other partners with me, is that you have to answer to your email super fast and make sure that all small tasks are done and you're on top of this, which is my inbox zero obsession. And then at the same time, you have to constantly push for the long task to make sure that the business jumps levels and grows much further. And that could be like raising funds. This could be like, for instance, we're lucky to be part of the Deloitte report next month. And that's all the academic work we've done and the measuring works, which is amazing once you do that, because obviously being part of the Deloitte report is adding so much credibility to us. So I think that means that I never miss a text on WhatsApp, an email, an Instagram PM, a LinkedIn. And if I am, and I'm catching up on a regular basis in between meetings. Yeah. Of course, as you know, it means that my emails are very short and abrupt. That's the only way you can do it, I think. But it means that I'm never in a place where I suddenly need to do 8 hours of desk time. And I can constantly run from meeting to events to project launches, to basically to just running the key relationship of the business. And I can also be there for my team, which is really important. So I think every day starts completely differently. There could be a PR breakfast, there could be a key meeting, there could be a flight going to another place. But my day do start by the second I've had my cup of tea with responding to the emails, making sure I'm constantly inbox zero, in the same way that I will go to bed and making sure there's not a single task left. Because I'm also in a place where, like, silly things, but yesterday, and I won't tell the exact names of the people, but a public art project that we had just launched had to be changed because one of the words was apparently challenging to the area. Now, the word was magic, so just before everyone is like panicked about what word we would have put forward, it was not an aggressive word, but the area I thought that was challenging. So we had to change that. If I was not on top of my inbox, if I was not on top of all my small tasks, I can't handle the crisis. And that is when you get so overwhelmed. And I'm sure we felt when we're not on top of it that you're just so run down and you can't be your best. So I think I've adopted a very sportive attitude to it. It's like a marathon. So you just check in, take the bottle of water from the marathon, keep running. And that is my inbox. And therefore my inbox has never been something that overwhelms me. It's something that I am in control of. And then it means that when I'm with people, I don't look at my phone and I can be 100% in to solving the crisis, to nurturing the relationship, to closing the deal or the partnership, to onboarding the person. And my brain is switching from a form of concentration of either listening to the other person and including that person physically or responding to the small tasks really quickly. And that feels very sportive. So that's what I think, that's the best way I can summarize my days, because as you know, my days will be so different on a day-to-day basis.
It varies all the time.
It will be such, like I could be on the Gucci shoot in the same way that I could be in Piccadilly Circus at 5 a.m. So there's no, there's definitely there's no normal days. But I think the short-term to long-term is very defining for me.
I think that something with this inbox zero thing, that's something that I have as well. However, I think that something that I noticed, and maybe this is a female thing, but it could also be just a person thing, a people pleaser thing, is that we always, at least for myself, I'm speaking from my own experience, is that I feel like when I send emails, I sometimes I read them and then I reread them and then I read them again just to make sure that everything's okay and formulated correctly. And I've begun to just kind of let go and just send, okay, this is the information that you need. I trust myself that I'm doing this right and that I'm formulating it in a good way, and it's fine and I can send it. Like, it's okay for me to just say what I need to say in an email. I don't need to overthink it.
I think it sounds, I think, you have to make sacrifices because you can't do it all is the answer.
Yeah.
I sadly have never been able to reread my emails. Obviously, like if it's something legal, which happens very rarely, but then of course you reread your emails.
Yeah.
But I think the rest of them I don't. And the reason why is because I've decided, talking about days. So yesterday, obviously we launched all this public art, but I also, one of my best friend had the birthday of her little boy at 5 p.m. And then just after this, there was the Hublot party on the Serpentine, which we're collaborating with the PR agency who is running it. And then I had a client's dinner. I need to be 100% in those places. I want to be at the birthday of Gabrielle, and I want my son to attend this too. So I simply don't have the time to put the perfect politeness around my communications on emails and WhatsApp.
Yeah.
I would expect that people who now know us know that when I'm with someone, I'm fully human and fully supportive, but I just don't have that time. I've never put that time in because I also wanted to be that person who turn up at 5 p.m. like yesterday when the birthday song starts, and I will be there for my friend. And I can't therefore be rereading everything twice because that means I will not be there for my friends, and I will not be there for my family, and I will not be there for my top clients as well, or my top talents. And it's just not the place I want to be in. But exactly. I'm sure sometimes it means that I make mistakes. I'm sure sometimes there are details that are overseen. I think as you grow, luckily your team can help you with that. But yeah, I think I can't. I've never been. And I completely understand. I think in a way, I'm sure you sometimes are avoiding mistakes that I will be making on the detail side of things. But it means I can fully leave and fully run the company by not rereading anything.
Well, and I think that comes into learning how to what to prioritize and what's important, because if you have a typo in an email, that doesn't really matter when you're sitting there at your client's dinner or at the birthday party and you're there for the people who you want to be there for, in person, present. Maybe in our society today, it's such a focus on what happens digitally as well as in person. And I think, juggling that is something that we need to contend with in this day and age. However, hearing that, I'm noting this down because I do really think that it's important to remind myself of this as well. Because learning how to prioritize that and not spending too much time overthinking these things is really good. I think that's a positive thing.
And I think being okay with the consequences of what the mistakes will be. I think in a sense I had a granny who was still here, who is 99 and who is all about consequences, who was very Sartre philosophy based, and I am very Sartre philosophy based as well. And I think by doing this email wise, I know that there will be 3%, 4% where I will have issues at times by not having reread the email, whether it's like overseeing a key detail or whether it's like someone finding it a bit abrupt. But I'm okay with the 3 to 4% margin because I think it's worth, the 96% of what it's getting me. So I think with everything comes what the consequences of that will be with that compromise. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm okay with those 3 to 4%.
Yeah. You need to learn how to navigate that in life. And I think that that's a positive attribute.
Definitely.
So speaking of attributes, what qualities do you look for in people that you want to work with, be it artists, employees, or collaborators?
I think you're learning about this every single day is the answer. I think, first of all, the right people can be right for different times. So someone could be right and then not right anymore. So I think with my long 13 years of experience and slowly short, small wrinkles, I can tell you that everyone can be right at a different stage, but it also means sometimes someone can start being wrong at a different stage. Mm-hmm. Meaning when you start a company, you need people who can do everything, who are not specialized. As you scale a company, you need people who are utterly specialized, because then they just can open department and lead with the way that they're being specialized. What you learn with a fast-growing company is that therefore it's not about whether that person is right or not. It's not about that person being great or not. It's about making sure that you're involving the person at the right time in their life and in the right time for the company, so that you damage as little relationship as possible, which is what a CEO is meant to do. Is you're meant to make sure that you damage as little people as possible in doing that. Because the thing with speed is, when you scale, is that sometimes that 2 or 3% on the email is also valid for people. There will be damages in terms of certain relationship. And so your entire job with experience is to make sure, how do I limit those damages? Mm-hmm. How do I make sure that, I only involve people who can really grow and really blossom through what I am doing. And I think therefore you learn to read within what people say. So I think first of all, at a junior level, what a junior say they want might be different to what they want. Now, this is completely fine, because the projection of what that person foresee the job to be can be quite different to what this is. Mm-hmm. So I think as a senior person, again, you need to read through. If the person says, this is a dream job, is it really? Is it really what their dream job are? Do they really understand, again, the consequences, the compromises, the length of hours, or the difference that will come with it? So you're getting better at seeing through that, and meaning that you're getting better at onboarding the right people. I think you also, I won't tell who this year, but I've had already to experience grieving people having to get off work for a very long time, mental health breakdown. You have an MBA in psychology, both on the talent front and both on the employees front, because just shit happens, life happens, and you need to make sure that you're getting that person in the right place mentally as well. So it's silly things, but one of the mental breakdowns that we had to experience team-wise was when we launched 12 public art projects on the same day. Yeah. And you have to take the long-term approach of being we'll take on extra work, but that person needs to be taking time off, so there's so much management. People comes with a huge amount of management. When you're a young funder, you're not used to managing people, and that's the hardest by far, because you are your own. I didn't have any other partners. I need to get to the objective. We need to survive as a business at the start, which we're not in that position anymore, but at the start you have to survive. But you also need to make sure that you don't hurt other people as you do that. So it's just a real juggle. It's really tough emotionally, but it also means I've grown so much. I think empathy intellectually emotional intelligence, my job has grown me so deeply, because you're constantly really thinking about other people, thinking, is it the right time? Are they okay? How do I get them there? It's not as simple as just saying, you go and run to the objective, you're just really managing. So I think with all this learning in place, for us, of course, we're a B Corp. I think we would want someone to care socially. I think if someone came with a great deal of arrogance, it'd probably be the wrong company. We are incredibly equality focused. We're very egalitarian. I don't think I handle entitlement very well. In fact, I think that's probably my worst match. I think as a company culture, someone that comes entitled will probably really struggle, because the whole thing of MTArt is, even as a boss, I take the bin downstairs if I see that there's a bin that needs to be taken downstairs. We lead by example as a senior team, and anyone that will have a slight sense of entitlement will highly struggle with the company culture. So I think you also learn who is right on that. I think definitely someone that wants to grow, in a sense that anything that's fast paced, I would not recommend it with someone that wants to cruise along and that wants a job that is a slow progression, because I think that will be really intense and overwhelming. But I think, Lise, Lise is 26. She's already sold her own company at 25. Lise is someone that wants to accelerate her career, grow, and make a name for herself. We're the perfect company for her, because we can give her the resources, give her a great salary, give her autonomy for her to achieve that. In the same way that Jan was 50 is in the same position, because he just sold his company and he wants to make a big name again and make another second impact. So I think we will be a great place for this, where we give you all those resources and you can really be accelerated. A place where you want a very chill 9 to 5 is probably not where you can find it. We're not going to be that company. It doesn't mean that we won't have flexibility if you require flexibility, but I do think the ambition and the drive and the feeling for speed and acceleration is very key to our values. I think creativity is also quite essential with who we work with. Creativity comes with also a degree of accepting change. I think if you're someone that is struggling with change, you would probably hate our company, because everything changes. You need to accept that the floor is moving as you're on it. I'm super comfortable with change, but I think, again, someone that is not comfortable with change and needs to be explained every reason to why the change is happening will probably find us very overwhelming again. So I think it's really less about what types, is more thinking, first of all, is it right for right now? And right now we're accelerating, so this is what we're looking for. It's also, is the job role going to make sure that those people will grow? And I think I'm in a team where all of them have so much potential for growth within their own role, and I love that, because it means that they won't get stuck, they won't get frustrated. And I'm sure in a year or 2 years' time, we will be again different. We will hire. I mean, the fact that we have 3 entrepreneurs who sold their companies will join my senior team is so new and completely been game-changing for us. And I never thought we'll be able to recruit those people in the first place. So I think the quality of people that you recruit and who you're recruiting is constantly changing, and the people make that. If Liz hadn't joined, Jan wouldn't have joined, and Ines will probably not have joined, because great people attract other great people, and the company culture is like a language, is constantly living, which I find fascinating. So I'm sorry, this is a very long answer, but I think it's because I think you should never be just set on what exactly is that you need, because a company culture or people surprise you all the time, and it could turn out this is the best person for your company without you having foreseen that, if that makes sense.
I completely understand what you mean. And I think one of the thoughts that was going through my mind as you were speaking about what is important in someone who, for example, you would like to work with, or who you see as having the potential to be successful, is the potential for growth, the eagerness to grow, as well as the ability to adapt to change. And I think that something that I've noticed within myself in the past, I'd say probably 2 to 3 years, is the fact that I think about 3 years ago, I wasn't very able to adapt to change. I think that it scared me. I think that I had difficulties, and I was very much if it doesn't go by the plan that I had set out, then I'm not happy. And I think that something that I've learned through things like, for example, leading the Art Business Society, which is where you and I met for the first time.
I remember.
Or working part-time during my studies, or trying to balance everything. I've become such a different person when it comes to adapting to change. And I agree that you have to be able to do that. You can't just drop it and be like, oh, well, now it's not working. You have to be able to roll with the punches because that's what the world is like.
Totally.
Yeah.
And actually, as be the last thing, I think chill characters would do very well with MTArt because we make jokes all the time, as you know. We're a very big GIF kind of culture and joke culture because we know we're not saving life. And I think someone that is very anxious will probably struggle because there are loads of egos, loads of drama. I think if you're someone very chill, this is perfect because you make a few jokes with it and then you continue.
Yeah.
Someone that can't handle that will probably also really struggle. But I think this is why we made it such a humoristic place to work in because I don't want, one of my team to start thinking everything is so dramatic because the reality is nothing is dramatic in what we do. Again, no one is dying. And by the second everything becomes dramatic, then that company culture will again be a nightmare to work in.
Yeah. Because it communicates that anxiety to others and everything kind of, it snowballs a little bit, or it has the potential to, and there's no necessity for it because in reality, you're working with amazing people with creativity. You're making lives better by bringing that creativity into everyday life. And yes, you're not saving lives, but you're improving them, I have to admit.
Yeah,
but
it's not, inspiring. And that's why I always say to the juniors, I said, like, ultimately, we're just all very lucky.
Yeah.
So at no point would any of that drama actually get to us. And if it does get to us, we should diffuse it by the second it arrives. So I think, personalities will strike with us are just good sense of humor, or even bad sense of humor, but at least someone very chill with regards to situations.
So when it comes to the structure of MTArt Agency and how it works and how artists are represented, what does it mean to be represented by a talent agency in the arts and cultural sector? Because we could be making the comparison to a more traditional approach of being represented by a gallery, for example, which often comes in conjunction with an exhibition space. Yeah. So how does MTArt Agency approach this?
So I think, great question. I think first you get finance on your studio cost every month, which was something we implemented even when we were not earning that much. The reason why is because it's a way to show our commitment to you. We're just like, we're in with you. We're already contributing money before you even making any for us, which was really important for us. And then the second thing is we would tailor a full strategy on where you want to go. Something that I was exposed to in LA and when hearing Michael is that actually, the art world puts artists in boxes. They say you will have a show once every 2 years, and then you'll have this once every 2 years, and then this is where you'll be reported about. I felt that actually most creative and most of my talents don't want that box. For some of them, the biggest dream is, like Sape, was to close the Champ de Mars and to launch it from the Eiffel Tower. For somebody else, it's like to do a really meaningful, like, institutional project. For somebody else, it might be to, like, do crazy collaboration with Vivienne Westwood. Like, you just can't assume. Like, Robert Montgomery's biggest dream was to do that project with Olafur Eliasson doing COP26, which is happening in a couple of weeks with us, that we've helped raising funds for. So every single one of them has a very different dream that they want to realize. So that's why we tailor a strategy. We don't just put you in a box. We don't put you, like, side by side. And then within your strategy, you'll be saying, I seem to be getting collectors to buy my works really easily, which obviously will emphasize, but you could be saying, like, I'm not taken seriously in that sector, or I don't seem to be getting opportunities in that sector. So that's why it's much more 360, because it's really making sure that the way you build revenue, credibility and visibility is tailored to you. And then we go and get those objectives with you, which felt much more around the talent than around the production of the talent, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I think that's by far the biggest difference.
Okay. So there's a focus on the personal goals. There's a focus on the personal talents.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line.
You basically bet on the human more than what they create, right?
Invest in artists.
Yes. Was, by far, we actually don't use it as much as we should. But it was a big statement when we said, don't invest in art, invest in artists. Because it was really very much a vision of, let's just back people. Yeah. But back people in their complexities more than just back a single artwork that is simplistic about the person.
Yeah. I mean, you know that I'm a big advocate for contemporary artists and living artists. I mean, my bag that I brought with me today is from Creative Debuts, and on it says, buy art from living artists, the dead ones don't need the money. And it is really about, I find personally, and this is why I also love working with MTArt Agency and why I find it really inspiring, is because I think it's so important, and I think it's so wonderful to see the art that reflects our current states, that reflects, for example, with David and nature and the environment and things that are going on now, and important themes that I think can be really didactic as well to people who are engaging with that art. And so for me, I just think it's one of the best things. It's one of the best places to be. It's one of the best areas in the visual sector is with these contemporary artists.
Yeah.
So how has the concept of a talent agency been adapted to the art sector? And in comparison to how we know it in, for example, modeling, show business? I mean, I know you've touched on this a little bit earlier, but also vice versa. How is our sector of the arts changing with the emergence of this kind of business model?
So I think that's a great question as well. I always remember there's actually a picture of me doing it, being on my whiteboard, defining the key principles of MTArt. At 25, when I therefore set out the business, it was a situation where it was either going to work, either I think I would have retired from the sector because I didn't like at all the way it was running. And I don't think I could have carried on being a figure as much as I was, leading a great gallery, and I had a lot of things early. I don't think I could have continued in that setup. So I just put and poured everything on that whiteboard with all the value system that was really mattering. At the time, I was reading Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged. Now, I know in the UK, this is an incredibly controversial book because for some reason, unknown reason, it was taken by the right wing, and obviously PayPal funded all those guys. As a socialist person, I see so much socialism in it, and I'm always puzzled to how this was kind of made a really strong right-wing book. Of course, at the end of her life, she became a more right-wing advocate, but initially that book was very much the URSS communism meeting capitalism in the States. So fascinating kind of complexity on the 1,200 pages that you cannot summarize to just be right-wing. Long story short, because I was setting up MTArt as I was reading this incredible book, she was ambitious enough to redefine entirely everything in the system. She was running a railway company, and she was redefining it on social policies, on the economics and the way it was running and distributed, the politics of it and the philosophy of it. And I was super inspired by that. I don't think I looked partially at the art world. I was just like, this is amazing. She's redefining a system on its own that works as a philosophy. And as someone that therefore cares a lot about philosophy, I was just like, I just have to build a philosophy of my own. And then I know that I can carry it on my shoulders, and I can sleep 2 hours and pitch it as many times as required, because that philosophy will make sense.
Yeah.
So that's what I built. I built a philosophy, and I defined it with the key values that will be MTArt, which is what we talked about and touched upon before. And that was first and foremost before I even tried to squeeze in a business model. I was confident that the execution, by the second I had the philosophy, the execution will be easy to execute, because it meant that I was comfortable with every single thing I was meant to do, and I could therefore be flexible in my execution. So the talent agency model was plugged to the philosophy. The reason I'm saying this is because Michael and all these guys are incredible, but the 80s were a horrible place to work in. The madmen of this world built toxic company cultures.
Yep.
And that was not what I wanted to build. It was not the kind of companies I wanted. So why, of course, I saw a great business model as a good millennial, I can just integrate it to the contemporary times, because I don't want, a floor of male yelling on the phone to get the best deal. I think we're past certain ways of working.
Yeah.
And that's just not the company I wanted to build. So first, that philosophy was essential to tell me, this is the values I will never compromise on. Now you plug the execution. Now the execution, of course, was the talent agency model. And that is when we looked at what are the revenue streams we can create that the sector hasn't created. Because the talent agency model is all about creating revenue streams for the talents. And that's what I thought, brand collaborations, digital collaborations, public art projects, all those revenue streams haven't actually been that exploited in the sector. So I used the structure of a talent agency to therefore implement the type of revenue streams in the sector that were non-existing, but bearing to my philosophy, which was really essential. And it meant that I could run it, I could pitch it. It was economically, financially relevant, which was the talent agency model, because I think it's a much better idea for the sector. But yeah, I think I could never have carried just an economical solution. I had to carry a philosophical and economical solution for me to be successful.
Okay. I think that is something that probably sort of answers my next question. However, I'm going to ask it anyway. So, what tip or tips would you give someone wanting to start their own business or business venture in the arts and cultural sector?
First of all, I was existential. It was a matter of life and death whether or not I was going to do this business. It was either this is working, either I'm retiring, and the world is over. It was very French about it. So I don't think a business needs to be that. I don't think a business needs to be that existential. I think you could start something that's already been done and add value to this by developing your clients and developing your partnerships, and then just add value to something that's existing. And that is way simpler, and that completely can be done.
Yeah.
I think if you're starting something existentialist because there's something boiling in your stomach and you're like, this doesn't exist, I need this idea to come to life, I think it's just bear in mind this is an enormous gamble, but also sacrifices wise it's on the highest of scales, because it's by far will be the hardest. But in a weird way, it might be the easiest to carry later, because I can be 300% myself. There's nothing I feel I have compromised on anything values wise, which is really, my shoulders are very light at night, and I can look at myself in the mirror very easily. So I found it easier. But I think don't forget that a business could just be, I love this artist and let's just sell their works, and I have a few clients to do that and a few partnerships. You don't have to revolutionize any sector to be a business. I think in our case we were incredibly ambitious. We wanted to disrupt a very traditional sector.
Yes.
Not everyone has to do that. And then I think also just again, having got 3 entrepreneurs who sold their companies and joined me, you can learn a lot, like you're doing with your podcast. You can learn a lot by being entrepreneurial. This doesn't mean you'll be forever an entrepreneur. And that is also fine. In a sense, you're building an incredible experience. The reason I think my senior team is amazing is because they have been entrepreneurs. They have been sometimes looking at the wall with no solution and having to come up with some, which is why I trust them 100%. So even if the business failed, it's not a failure. It doesn't really matter, really. It's just you have acquired a set of skill sets. That means you're a great hire. And that's the thing not to forget. Like, if your business is not working, just drop. Like, just, sell it, join somebody else, try and rebuild another one. It's success doesn't really matter. It's just really about the fact that you're just constantly learning and acquiring skill set. And that job does make you acquire the best of skill sets.
Yeah. I think letting go of that idea of, and I think you touched on this earlier about someone with entitlement or big egos. And I think that something like that is really, maybe it's because I'm so immersed in the arts sector and the visual sector that I see it a lot, and I'm not going to make generalizations and say that it's only in the arts sector, because I'm sure it's in every other sector. But you see so much of this extreme focus on how to be successful. And I think that shifting the priorities to be something else will give someone more freedom, will, I think, empower people a little bit more to be a little bit more experimental, will allow people to think outside the box a little bit. And I think that that's something that you mentioned just now when thinking about starting your own business.
It seems unlikely now that MTArt will fail in the position we're in, but if it did, I come with a community of clients, of talents, of partnerships, with skill set. I can be hired tomorrow, and that's fine. Like, in a sense, that's great, and it's also been an incredible experience life-wise. What I would have learned so much. Now, I think realistically this is unlikely at that stage.
Yes.
I think what's less likely is more for me to raise a fund and invest in other entrepreneurs than I think being hired. But I think I would totally be okay with that. And I think that is why I built an existential business, is because I was okay with failure. When MTArt was funded, back to the dear Ayn Rand, who's so tough on every single of her words, is I think I was okay with failure for the first time. I was okay to look ridiculous, to embarrass myself, to do things I've never done before, to risk complete failure and embarrassment because I didn't care about it anymore. And I think that book liberated me. It's also one of the few books where you have a woman leading it who is not trying to please, who's not trying to be liked, she's trying to be respected, she's trying to do something. And I think that was liberating, because as I built MTArt, I was like, I don't mind what the outcome of it is. Like, I think this needs to be built, and I will build it. And that's utterly liberating on the entire execution you're going to take about this, because you're not going to be caring really about certain things that your competitors will care, like how you're perceived by the sector, how you perceive when you walk into a room. I just didn't care anymore. And that was very liberating.
Yeah. I need to read this book.
It's just, I think, just read it. You know what? I think you do. I think
I read everything you recommend to me.
Well, Mary Portas is a great. I think
Yeah.
it's just. I think it's so ambitious that a woman in the 60s wrote this. I think disregarding of all the opinions, because I think with 1,200 pages, there's always opinions you're not going to agree with. I think the ambition to say, I think there's a better system out there, let's craft it. And for a woman to do that, I think is incredible. And I think this gives you so much strength, thinking she's done that. Like, it's also just having just escaped the USS to kind of come to London for that matter, I think is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that taking that inspiration from other people and also looking at it critically, as you mentioned, what you had learned when you did your first degree is this critical thinking. And so when you read these books, or like I was listening to a podcast the other day as well, and I just thought, oh, I don't agree with that point. And that's completely okay. I can still respect the podcast, and I can listen to the points, and I can learn from it, and I can take that and, I guess, digest it and process it while also thinking critically about it.
Totally.
Because that's, the constructive way that you learn. You learn about yourself, you learn from others, and I think that's a very positive thing.
Totally. But for me, life is about respect. And respect means you will have different opinions.
Yeah.
And that's how you would learn of it. I just really don't care about being liked, but I do respect people that I think have achieved things or have got strong opinions, and I can't wait to challenge them or hear to why they have these opinions. Respect is everything, but it also means that by the second you go about life more on respect, you should accept that most of your friends or even my team doesn't think the same way as I, and that's okay. This is what actually makes you strong, is that you are a group of people that thinks differently and that therefore goes towards the same objective.
Yeah.
If you were all thinking the same reason, you will fail the business, and you will fail also. You will not learn much from your friends, I think.
Yeah, I think that you're completely right in saying that, you don't really want quote unquote yes men, because you can't be right all the time. And there is somebody there to then say, hey, let's do this idea, or let's look at it this way, or let's look at these different perspectives, because we're all only human. And we have, as you say, you've built this amazing team with creative people, with people who think outside the box. And that's really good to always, consider that, take it on board and be inspired by it, because that's how you create these inspiring projects. Speaking of inspiring projects, tell me more about how MTArt Agency contended with COVID-19. However, I do know that we're going to be covering a little bit more of this in later episodes, but just kind of talking to me about how that really...
COVID was quite a thing, as we all know. I think all of us have had a very unique experience of it. And not to kind of mention, I'm definitely from the luckiest categories of people within the COVID pandemic. COVID was, timing-wise, absolutely incredible for us, because it's a bit like Match Point of Woody Allen, because we had the perfect timing when it comes to it, as much as I would never wish for a pandemic. What's happened is I was 8.5 months pregnant, where I launched the largest public art painting in the world with artist Sape from the Eiffel Tower. I decided not to take maternity leave. It was a conscious decision of the fact that, as a very present founder, I had to prove that having a baby meant the company was only growing exponentially. And in fact, the baby was never bad news. It was only a bonus and a good news. And I wanted this for Atlas, because I felt that my son should be born in an explosion of good news. He should never be kind of born in a place where the companies could resent him for his existence. So I, as a person, did the marathon thing, where I had sepsis, and I basically started running. And I told to my body and I have a great contract to each other. I said, you'll be running for 6 months. You're not going to be able to breathe, but I promise after 6 months it'll be over and I will give you rest. And it was like one of those weird contracts that I signed. And that meant I wanted absolutely that baby. And I was like, this is it. You want the baby, you want the company to go. This is your contract. And I did the contract with my body, for that matter. The day he was born, so he was overdue when the largest contract to date was being negotiated for MTArt. I arrived at Vice Media overdue, because Atlas was 12 days overdue. It's the point where you can't even wear a bra anymore because you're so enormous. You're like an enormous well sitting there with the vice team. And I pitched a project and we got it. And that was a number financially that we had never attained at MTArt. It was by far the largest project we ever got. Yeah. It was a feminist festival in Saudi Arabia with Vice Media. You can't invent that. Like, it generally, you can't even invent it, but it happened. Now, he was overdue. If he hadn't been overdue, because I had sepsis, it meant that I would probably never have got the project. When he was born, the contract was signed with the New York lawyers, which was completely surreal. I had this moment where I was getting in and out of the maternity hall while signing the largest contract in my career, which was very surreal. And then the project was implemented 1 week before lockdown 1. If the project hadn't been implemented, it meant we would have lost 50% of the amount of money that we were going to get, which meant I would have had to furlough people. Mm-hmm. But the fact that the project could be implemented, I walked into a pandemic for the first time being safe financially as a business. Yeah. And not being worried about whether my business will survive or not, which was completely surreal. Because if I had taken maternity leave, you normally take 6 months. The pandemic would have hit when I would have just restarted. So it was just one of those things where I just was like, this is so incredibly lucky on all fronts, because I'm walking into a pandemic when I will be one of the few companies from my sector who will not be worried about money, which means I can make the right decisions on how we want to hire people, implement the right solutions, help our clients, help our partnerships. So that was, none of it is strategic. This is luck. Like, you just, I have some of my girlfriends, sadly, who had just implemented a series of retail stores and the pandemic broke. Like, this is called luck. And we just were very lucky. And so the pandemic broke at that point. And the second decision that was very weird that I took, so this is a series of very weird decisions from a COVID perspective. My Paris director at the time, Louise, had a tiny apartment in Paris, and I suggested she move in with us because we just signed for a new house 2 weeks before COVID, which had many more space. And so I invited her to kind of stay with me. We didn't know how long the pandemic will go, but I said, look, your apartment is tiny, France is very strict on the regulations, why don't you move in? Which I'm sure from a boss perspective is a very weird thing to ask. But I said to her, I promise we'll make it really nice. We'll make it like flowery, good food stuff. But I have a feeling that you need to move in because it will be tough in France. You won't be able to get out of your house. It was a bit more lax here. And I think we can look after you. She moved in. The second weird thing that happened, as you know the story, is that Lise, who was an investee of her business, decided to sell the business, but also because it was with her current boyfriend that they had built it for the past 6 years, they also split up and were in the same apartment. To that point, as you know the story, I said to Lise, you can't stay with your ex. This is very unhealthy. Yeah. You just sold the business. You need a place, but you obviously can't rent a new apartment during COVID. She moved in as well. Yeah. So the story goes that I suddenly have a Californian startup in the center of Marylebone where every single delivery from my collectors are being kind of sent from. And I have Lise, who I didn't know was about to become my colleague. Yeah. And Louise, who was my colleague, on site with the baby, no childcare, all in the same place. And this is when I get the first call by Westminster saying this is going to be a disaster on the retail front. Like, we are losing so many of our clients. Our high street is being decimated. We need to step up. We need to do something. And same with Carl Estate. We need to do something for the people who live and work there, which is where our Californian startup kind of took a whole different meaning, because then we ended up having to measure every single part of every single street in London. And we had this surreal situation that we were in central London, like we were completely in the heart of the city as it was collapsing on the retail front. So we could report quite literally on saying, this shop is changing, this retail partner has changed, you should implement this. We see people on the street and they're saying X, this is who actually work on a daily basis, this is who live on a daily basis. So we had a full sense of this is the evolution that the city is taking, which means that during the pandemic, we implemented over 40 public art projects in central London. Lise obviously became our incredible CEO and joined the company still in the same house, and we measured all of it and tried all of it. It was magical. This lockdown one was magical because we proved that art could really help. And I think there's one thing to say it, and there's another thing to kind of say it on a daily basis. We were on the ground with the baby in the pram and the people saying to us, I'm having such a shit time. but this is really uplifting me. I'm doing that route as an NHS worker, as someone that needs to kind of keep the street intact, and this is really helping me. And we were just getting that feedback on a daily basis, and this was amazing because, you know, this was not a marketing campaign, this was a real thing on the ground that we were implementing. This obviously changed everything on the public art front for us, because it meant that, of course, we had always done public art to that stage, but I think we were taken so much more seriously from that point on. And it was a beautiful spring, as you know, so we just were constantly outside implementing those with those reactions. So I have a really fond memory of all of this, and I know that Lisa and Louise are the same, and therefore we all share this together. Sadly, as you know, Louise has been unwell recently, but we can't wait to have her back to celebrate it all properly together. And yeah, it's been magical, I think, since the company has boomed. So it meant that we tripled revenue through all of this, not just through the public art, but also the collaboration that happened on the backlog of it, because all the retail stores also used us at the time. And then it became more like campaigns with the artists. So we boomed. And there's a funny story, therefore, is from this whole lockdown, is one of the most famous investors in our space, called Frédéric Jousset, invited me to talk about investing in the company. I'm obsessed with experiences, as you know, but it was a lockdown. You couldn't provide an experience. You could only meet outside. That day we wanted to meet, which was a day that would change the course of the company, because it was going to invest.
Yeah.
It was pouring with rain, November. And I was still like, I've got to get him a hot chocolate or something. So I was timing when it was going to arrive to do the public art and then sit. I had identified that Kingly Court was still protected by the rain, so we could somehow have a coffee experience. And then there was takeaway hot chocolates. I kind of nailed the experience at that point, still in this like lockdown to like November pouring with rain months. And then Frédéric Jousset joined us as an investor, which meant again that like, yeah, everything changed again. So it was very surreal, but I think our life did change. I think in a way MTArt has always been very responsive and very able to deal with change and crisis, because we were a disruptor, so we understand what it means to change fast. So I think maybe we were better equipped to deal with a pandemic, but it has been magical up to that point. And I'm so glad I've been able to share it with Lise, because I think there's a thing where we can pass on now that we're in this beautiful office behind Bond Street. You know, we can remember the days we were on that blue sofa, solving basically the public art retail collapse of all the high streets in London together from a blue sofa. And I think that's really healthy for a company to have this kind of memories shared from a team perspective.
I think that being a part of the MTArt Agency community, like as an ambassador, because that's what I have been up until this point, and you know, with this project I remain an ambassador, but also kind of feeling like I was a part of a community as well, because I wasn't here in London. I was stuck over in Salzburg. I couldn't get back to London, and even if I was in London, my life wouldn't have been the same. I would have been in my tiny box apartment that I love dearly, but it's not great for being inside all the time. Because I think a lot of people were feeling this way, and I'm going to be very candid in saying that I think it felt like Groundhog Day. Like it felt like you were getting up in the morning, and you know, I would sit down and I would have uni or I would have work, and it would be on my computer. I'd be in the same place every day because I was finishing my degree. And so then after work or after uni, because I had to pay my rent as well, I would try to do something like attend a Zoom gallery. What is it? What I can't even now. My mind is just blocking it out. It's like, you know, online viewing rooms or all of that. And I think that I was trying so hard to feel like I was doing something with my career, because I think that stagnating is one thing that I just don't like to do. I am very, very ambitious, I think. And so feeling like I was a part of a community and feeling like I had the support and I had some inspiring women around me was something that I think really helped me. And so I'm very thankful that I got to take part in that. And then, you know, as you say, that there's NHS workers passing the public art projects and saying, this is my way to work and this is my route, because honestly, workers in the NHS deserve the absolute world. And so being able to help them and being able to inspire them in their morning, I think that's the best thing.
It was very much a world of extremes, because as you remember, sadly, the 2 to 3% rule is always the case. We've had a conflict with a talent at the time that was very meaningful, that I was dealing quite intensely with. And I think mental health wise, for me, it was such a weird time, because this is why also the three girls, it was so meaningful to be together, because I wanted to radiate. It is the point when you're a founder or CEO, you need to make sure you pass on good vibes and you pass on good energy to the entire community. And I think that it felt like the emotion we were passing on were really kind of as deep as it could from our bodies and our systems and our hearts, because I was also dealing with, sadly, a lot of change, which obviously now that, I'm in that position in life, I can see that it was completely meant to kind of happen, like with the company's experience in the very right way. But I was still coming out of a pregnancy where obviously you're still feeling quite vulnerable. You now got a pandemic. You're now trying to make sure to be that positive person to the rest of the people.
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that everything we were doing was meaningful every day also pulled me mental health-wise, because it meant that, like, there's a point, especially when you get punches in your face, where you just like, is it really worth it? Is it really worth kind of almost mental health-wise being kind of low about it?
Do you have those days? Like, where you feel that way?
I don't think I have down days of like, I can't get up in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm a very existential person. I definitely have the ongoing existential question making. Is it right? What am I doing in life? And how so? And I think the lucky thing with, it sounds silly. Like last night, there was a Financial Times article on Yalda Hakim, who interviewed, my girlfriend, we interviewed the Taliban's in Afghanistan a few weeks back. She's a BBC journalist, and she just bought a work by Aziko. I'm in a world where, like, I am involved in projects where, like, you have to be deeply human. Yeah. So I think I'm lucky that when I'm asking my existential question, I'm being hit back every time that, yes, you are doing something meaningful, even if at times it's hard, even because that's the thing with people, even if one person loses it or attacks you or there's issues, I am being reminded. I think I could never take those punches if I was selling handbags. Like, I would have totally given up by now. Yeah. Like I would just be like, I am not taking those punches and I'm staying at home. But I think in the job that I'm doing, I can take them, because I am being reminded daily that this is something that is really adding value. So I think the answer is, of course, like everybody else, you do get the lows, but you get the verification that you are adding value, and that does push you to keep going, if that makes sense. Yeah. But I couldn't, have a handbag company. I've given up. Yeah. I can completely understand. When I was 18, 19, I worked in high-end retail, so I was selling handbags before I came to London. And that was something that I think informed my decision to go into the arts, is because I realized that I didn't want to be doing that. Yeah, I couldn't. I mean, I was at Harrods as well to pay for my BBC internship, and I couldn't. Yeah. And with all due respect to all of this, it's more the fact that I just couldn't take punches on behalf of it. Yeah, exactly. So in your downtime, well, you don't really have downtime, do you? I mean, it's a give and a take, I think. You have to, you're a human, you have to have downtime. So as you know, no human being can have it all. Exactly. I've decided I will be the best of my friends, my family, and I will do what I love. I don't have me time. Yeah. And it's already, from a female perspective, I'm getting so much of life already. But what I have sacrificed is me time. Now I am doing what I love. So me time is also like me seeing people enjoying the sculptures in Piccadilly yesterday is, in a weird way, it does fill me with joy. But yes, I would not have a single second of me time, because I want that to be with my friends or with my son or with the job I love. So it's that's a decision I've made on the compromises to make sure that I can do the rest. So I think that my next question, because even though you don't necessarily have that me time that we maybe might traditionally think as me time, I know that you do find time to read a lot and you consume a lot of that type of media. Yeah. So what have you been reading lately, be it magazines, articles, or books that have inspired you? So it sounds like a branding for MTArt, but our Paris director, Ines Leonarduzzi, published Repair the Future and Discussing Digital Waste. I think it's horrifying, as a read. I mean, obviously Ines is so knowledgeable about the topic, but it's just more the fact that, like, I think all of us felt, oh, this is fine, the physical waste is one thing, so now we're going on the digital side of things, and obviously our computers, all of it, I'm not saying we're doing a podcast, but are consuming tons, and they're not being recycled properly, as we all know. So I think that was a very tough read. I think it's also, therefore, someone I'm learning a lot from. The second thing, I read a lot of women, as you know. I'm a big reader of female writers. No offense to men. I get so much more deep-rooted energy from reading a woman, because I'm just like, you've done it, you're doing it. We need to back more of that. But another read that was in French is Gisèle Halimi. She was a lawyer that acquitted a lot of people during the colonies, when the colonies were not becoming, they were becoming independent. And a lot of people were sent to death having fought on the colony side, especially from the French and Tunisian side. And she acquitted a lot of them and then became a very famous human rights lawyer. Now, Giselle book, you just read it in like 2 hours. You barely can breathe out of it. And she's a flux of life. She's like a punch in your face. It's almost like one of my favorite adverts by Nike is the one of Serena Williams, where she's like, women are crazy, but then all those women just like change the norm. And you're reading that book, and you just get punched with how much energy she had, and how much will she had to change it. And that was so refreshing, because she's just writing it. She's just like, such was life.
Yeah.
This is it. And you just get it in your face. And I think this, again, gives you energy for the remaining few months. Incredible woman as well. An incredible lawyer.
Okay. So on to my penultimate question. Are there any plans or goals for MTArt Agency that you can divulge here with me today?
Yeah, totally. Not something like world domination. We just opened the Paris office with Ines. So like this time is like a proper space in the 9th arrondissement in Paris. So now we have London, Paris, Monaco. And we're looking at the States next. So I'm in a position where, I know it's quite exciting. I'm in a position where, like, obviously recruitment is key. I'm like trying to spot the best people that could lead this company. That is like my obsession. And make sure that you onboard them. I think it's, in a weird way, something I've learned recently about recruitment with Lise, Jan, and Ines specifically, is I've just gone for people who were not looking for a job. And I think that has been by far something, in the same way that I go for talents and I go higher than I can, have almost. Like I go for talents who are incredible. I think I've applied the same principles to my team. And so I think the next step is very much to recruit those incredible people, which so far seems to be successful. So that's amazing. I think you will definitely see larger scales partnerships and projects. I think we're getting to a point where whether the public art is getting permanent, whether or even the scale of public art is much larger, whether the partnerships also are much larger, and still sustainable, because as you know, as a B Corp, we really care that the materials being used are reused or been used before. So I think, but I think there's very much a vision on the scale is going to be much more drastic, because we're a larger team, we can handle a larger scale.
Yeah.
Recruiting even better people. And we're in a way, like, we're not surviving anymore. So now we're scaling. So
yeah,
you will see that the caliber of the artists is a much higher caliber than before. And there's people in the pipeline that are crazy for us to think we've onboarded them. And that's really special. So I think, frankly, the sky is the limit at that point. It's just making sure everyone gets there in one piece. But yeah, we're not surviving anymore, so we can invest constantly and reinvest in making sure the company grows, which is an amazing feeling, is the answer.
Yeah. And that ties into my final question, which is kind of a 2-in-1. What is your vision for MTArt Agency for the future? And what is your vision for the partnership with myself and the All About Art podcast?
So I think the vision for MTArt Agency is to be the talent agency of reference for the sector.
Yeah.
We want to be even better than even the top galleries for artists, but even better than the top talent agencies for artists. So we want to be very competitive on that front. Same way when it comes to placemaking and creative partnerships with artists. That's essential to us. So I think that's definitely kind of, again, sky is the limits, but we think we can be the best. We already are the number one. We think we can be the very best and the largest. And I can't wait to do it with social and B Corp principles, because that would be so cool to think we've achieved that success, but we've actually never compromised on the values that were to that success. So I can't wait to demonstrate that. I can't wait to prove that. And I'm excited about this. In terms of our partnership, I think on the female front, as the less we're surviving with MTArt, and the more now we're striving, and I'm not worried about the business, the more I've taken a role of just making sure that every woman I think is amazing, I want to be part of that journey. And that has become a big part of the way I spend my time as well. I can do that more, and I feel with you, like, you know, by the second we met, I think you're going to do incredibly well, as you know yourself. I think there's a huge amount of potential, and my drive is that. My drive is, how can I be next to women that I think are going to be extraordinary? How do we just pack them ourselves together and finally just have a stronger diversity in the sector in terms of the leadership? So you're definitely totally into that. I think the podcast is because we kept on, as you know yourself, I called you when I was on the bicycle on a very summer day, and I kept on being asked those questions about the inside out of the business of MTArt. And I think our vision is also so drastically different to the sector that I can't wait to make that content accessible. And I think the way you approach content is very much accessible as well. And I think it's just passing the knowledge. You know, I feel it's passing that baton and making sure those people kind of grab that stick and run with it. And that's the way I see the podcast is just for people to realize really that the philosophy, the vision, the values are strikingly different. This is what we want to execute. This is how we're going to execute it. And I hope they're inspired. I hope not only would they join our community and do things with us, but also have the wish to change the sector with us. And I hope that content does create that reaction in a way that I could not do it through Instagram or LinkedIn, because it's quite limiting on how much you can write or pass content on. Yeah. And I think a podcast is enabling this a lot more.
Yeah. It's a different way of consumption. It's a different format. And I think that having that variety is really important. But for anyone listening, please do stay tuned in the upcoming months for the further episodes that are coming with MTArt Agency.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for sitting down with me today, Maureen. And that is it for today on All About Art. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating or a review, as it helps more people discover the show. Also, feel free to share with your friends, or if you share on social media, tag me and get in touch. Thank you so much for listening.